Welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast, the show that empowers gay men to live their fullest, healthiest lives. Whether you're navigating relationships, mental health, intimacy, finances, career, or personal growth, Ken Howard, a licensed clinical social worker in California, certified psychiatric social worker, and ASEC certified sex therapist, is here to guide you with over 30 years of experience, specializing in gay male individuals, couples, and polycules. As the founder of GayTherapyLA.com and GayCoachingLA.com. And now, today's episode.
Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about gay men and coping with the forms of betrayal. So what is betrayal? Betrayal is the violation of a person's trust, often involving the breaking of implicit or explicit expectations in a close relationship. Psychologist Janice Abrams-Spring, PhD, defines betrayal as a violation of a spoken or unspoken contract, which shatters a person's assumptions about the reliability, integrity, or loyalty of someone who was assumed to care. It's interesting that she uses that word, a violation of a spoken or unspoken contract. When I taught couples therapy for graduate students at USC in their MSW program, the first unit talks about how in a relationship, there are a number of contracts that the partners make. And that would be true with two people or three or polycule. But it really is a form of contracting, which is a form of just serious discussion about sitting down and saying, what are we going to agree to do or not do in the context of the values that we have and how we're relating to another person, meaning our partner. But there also can be certain kind of spoken or unspoken contracts, in some cases written contracts, about employer and employee or between business partners, in a business. It can be a lot of different kinds of contracts and agreements, and it's a form of interpersonal trust. And that's why, for gay men, betrayal can take many nuanced forms. Some are overt, others are more subtle, but they're shaped by our unique social dynamics and relationship models and often marginalized status in the broader society. In some ways, you could say that gay men, through minority stress, are betrayed in general by global society because of the laws and the social customs and the pressures that gay men have as a minority group that mainstream heterosexual men do not have. We are betrayed by our fellow countrymen or by the people sometimes of the world who are guilty of very aggressive legal or social or other forms of aggression and betrayal. So it's especially relevant to gay men to think about the different forms of betrayal. So today we want to explore how gay men experience and cope with betrayal in romantic relationships, in friendships, in professional circles, and family systems. And let's discuss also some strategies for healing. Let's first look at cheating in relationships. So for many gay men, whether in a monogamous or open or polyamorous relationship, cheating remains one of the most painful kinds of betrayal. Even in consensual non-monogamy, partners can still violate agreed upon rules. That can be a betrayal. So it doesn't have to be breaking a monogamy agreement. It can be breaking the rules in a consensual non-monogamous agreement about the ground rules. So whether the betrayal is emotional, which is forming an inappropriate connection with someone else that you shouldn't be, or physical, engaging in a prohibited sexual activity, the damage stems not just from the act, but from the deception and broken agreements. People say a lot when it comes to affairs and things like that. It's not the sex, it's the dishonesty. So many articles and podcast episodes that I've done explore, cheating, which is a word I don't really like because it's so judgment laden. I just kind of say breaking an agreement. But that's used, both gay and straight relationships. But it's about how sexual or emotional or both dynamics create a connection among some people, but at the cost of disconnection with others. Cheating basically means breaking an agreement, often with some kind of dishonesty involved, or obscuring the truth, omitting the truth, evading the truth about our experiences of what we've been doing and who with. For gay male couples who choose monogamy, which is a choice that is sometimes not validated enough in the broader gay male community, as it is their choice, between or among the partners, just having any version of consensual non-monogamy is an option. Having sex with other guys is just agreed upon to be not done. You just don't have that as part of your life. You're just focused on each other for emotional and sexual connection. But maybe there's a discussion about what is allowed. Maybe if sex with outside partners is not allowed, maybe sexting is allowed, because it's just words and playing with your phone. Some guys don't mind that. It's because no one's in the room with you. Maybe there's a light flirting among friends, or guys out in the community, or when you're out at a party or a bar or a club. Maybe a light flirting is okay, just not going home and having sex with them. Maybe dancing with other guys, or spending time with other guys, but not any kind of oral or anal or tactile, like frottage sex. And when this agreement is violated by one or both partners, it's a betrayal of what was expected and the values behind why it was expected. Because not hooking up with others had some value or meaning or purpose behind it. Oftentimes, this is to hold sacrosanct sexual relations between two people as an expression of deep emotional and romantic and domestic and sometimes spiritual bonds, and perhaps an observance of a deeply held social custom or a religious belief. Although monogamy can be chosen for secular reasons as well, such as a deep, intimate bonding that the partners feel could only be achieved if they restrict sex with others and really invest in the sexual and emotional relationship between the two of them. And sometimes in a polycule, you can have monogamy just among the partners in the polycule. Now, in contrast, in consensual non-monogamy, betrayal can be any form of doing something you shouldn't, such as violating the agreement of who, what, when, why, and how, which is a previous podcast episode about in consensual non-monogamy. It's exploring the who, what, when, where, how, and why about outside partners. So what I see most in my practice with gay male relationships when there is betrayal in non-monogamous relationship is that the what, one partner doing something that makes the other partner uncomfortable, triggering their abandonment fears, such as getting too close to an outside sex partner emotionally. That's a common one I see. But it can also be things like having a type of sex, like anal sex when it was agreed only to do oral sex with outside guys. Or it could be about hooking up with one of your friends or someone in your immediate circle, causing some kind of social awkwardness later. I've seen that a few times in relatively recent years. Or rules about hooking up with an ex-boyfriend or an ex-partner that can feel emotionally threatening to the current relationship. Or some other variable that violates the ground rules that hopefully the partners have determined through a thorough discussion together, which is something I help gay male clients with in both therapy and relationship coaching, both services, and in both couples and in polycules. Because these overlap, because the ground rules of open relationships is a common discussion in many gay relationships. Sometimes I say I don't see how sometimes couples embark on consensual non-monogamy without having support from, a sex-positive, preferably trained sex therapist like me, but somebody to support them in that process and help them kind of navigate, what feels right and what doesn't feel right. Sometimes when you're negotiating consensual non-monogamy, it's really important to talk about examples of things that your partner could do that could really bug you and really creep you out and make you uncomfortable in your value system. And then maybe giving examples of ways that they could hook up with other people that aren't particularly threatening. Creating kind of a red list of things to be avoided, but also it's important to have a green list of things that might be fun and are not particularly threatening. It's good to talk about both, and the reasons behind an activity is on the green list or the red list. So what is the coping strategy for betrayal in relationships? So recovery from a betrayal in a relationship involves rebuilding trust, which may require couples therapy or relationship coaching, that's another overlap area, to reinvent the relationship, or a discussion of how to revisit accountability, clarifying and setting new, maybe clearer boundaries. And sometimes it's about the very difficult decision to part ways. When it comes to betrayal in a relationship, it gets somewhat harshly simple. You either find a way to get past it or you break up. It's kind of black and white. There's lots of different ways of getting past it, but sometimes it's like, no, there is no getting past it. We're breaking up because it's just the last straw or something like that. Or you realize that the basic compatibility between the partners is not there, and that it would be a humane act to allow yourself and your partner even, to break up, be single for a while, and then have the opportunity to form a relationship with a more compatible partner in the long term. Somebody else, somebody different. But I help most gay relationships get past betrayals because some kind of a betrayal is very common in relationships, and it would be very hard to find a partner where any form of betrayal is never present in the relationship, especially in the long term when we're talking about decades. So it doesn't have to be a sexual betrayal. Even just not being there emotionally when your partner is hurting or sick or grieving can be a betrayal. Repair in relationships is about first understanding that there was a betrayal and why it was a betrayal, and then negotiating how the future might look and healing it so that intimacy and trust and closeness can be restored and sometimes reinvented. Let's talk about betrayal and gossip in friend circles. So within gay male friendship networks, we have these in cities all over the world, all different kinds of communities where gay men bond together and find each other in social support, especially after maybe they felt isolated growing up. So in gay male friendship networks, especially those that are tight-knit or socially competitive, gossip can feel like a social treason. When a trusted friend discloses personal or embarrassing information behind one's back, it becomes a betrayal of the intimacy of the friendship. And it can damage reputations and relationships and self-esteem and status in the community, or maybe status in a profession. So gossip is awfully tempting. There's a titillating, naughtiness to control sensitive information. It can be kind of a power trip to say, I have information that's valuable. It's not common knowledge. It's special knowledge, and I have it. It's like Elizabeth Taylor owning the Krupp diamond. She had something valuable that was rare, and then she controlled what she could do with it. Well, gossip can be that way. Juicy. A piece of gossip can be like a valuable little thing that maybe you share with somebody because you want to have a laugh over it, or because you want to feel, superior to that person, or something. Look at the functions of what gossip can be. Look at what gossip columnists about movie stars or music performers say every day. It can be a form of wielding power and influence using information that you have that others would like to have and might treat you with favor if you gave them that information. TMZ will pay for good celebrity dirt. For gay men, gossip can be a way of managing male competition in the pack and establishing a certain pecking order among a group of friends. Gay men are still men, and groups of men do tend to compete. All you need to do is watch RuPaul's Drag Race and see this is a group of competitive men. They may be tits, there may be wigs, there may be makeup, there may be all kinds of stuff, but you know what? There's still guys that are competing for cash And that sounds like a fraternity or a law firm or, a football team can be like that. Because you put guys together in a group and they're going to find a way to compete, even when they love each other in a relationship. And gossip can be pretty maladaptive as a social phenomenon, but it's still very common. And it's a way sometimes to express aggressive impulses. It can feel good to get even with somebody through gossip or to take someone down a peg if we're jealous or envious of them. But gossip is a very dysfunctional way of managing these aggressive impulses related to negative feelings like anger or jealousy or envy or fear, or just the need to control one's environment. I can't control that my boss is a jerk and overworks me and is very unfair to me, but you know what? I can control gossip. I can exercise control over something. And for some guys, that's their defense in their stress. So let's look at the coping strategy for betrayal by way of gossip. If you learn of a betrayal from one of your friends to someone else about information about you, evaluate first how bad the transgression was. If it was minor, like saying you like a certain kink that is a little embarrassing but not very serious, it might be okay. But if you feel seriously undermined about a peer betraying something that you said in confidence, consider confronting the source calmly and assertively and explain why what they said was damaging to you. And then assess whether they are truly sorry or just sorry they got caught. Maybe the experience reveals a rift with that so-called friend that needs to be brought into open discussion. Maybe there's a rivalry that you guys aren't talking about, or maybe there's a jealousy, or maybe there's some kind of hostility that somehow came out this way in a betrayal, but it needed to be talked about a while ago. There was a podcast episode I did a long while back about breakups in a friendship. But it would be nice if, even in the context of a betrayal from a friend, if we didn't necessarily lose the friend over it, could there be repair, just like there might be repair in a romantic relationship after a betrayal? So if you talk it out and you receive an apology or even some kind of a plan for that person to make amends to you, that's great. Other times you might need to gracefully back away from that person or from that group and create some distance between you and a toxic group of peers. We all know about toxic circles of gay men that aren't up to much good, that you just want to kind of steer clear of. They're not adding value to your life. Surrounding yourself with emotionally mature friends becomes a vital form, actually, of self-care, actually of your self-esteem. You're not allowing yourself to be around toxic people. You love and care about yourself enough that you're only going to allow yourself to be around people who, okay, maybe not perfect, but they're reasonably emotionally supportive and they're reasonably decent. I see this often as gay men get older. The friend circles generally get smaller, but they become more intimate and even profound as a long-term trust builds. And we have to expect only what we give. When we get mad about gossip, we have to think about if we've been guilty of the same thing and just make a personal values commitment that we don't gossip. If we hear that so-and-so has a drug problem, we might not repeat that, but we might give general expressions of values, such as, I care about the health of all my friends, and just leave it at that. And not repeat new information of, oh, not only does so-and-so have a drug problem, oh, by the way, he has a domestic violence problem. You don't build on some kind of a bad news campaign against somebody in your circle. So let's talk about betrayal as disclosure of secrets. Very similar, the deliberate versus the accidental. So betrayal often occurs when personal information, like having an STI or a health status, your HIV status, something in your sexual behavior, financial challenges, a criminal history, or mental health details, when that personal information is shared without your permission. Even accidental slips can have serious consequences, especially if the information ends up with employers or family members or romantic partners. There's actual damages there that can happen. And people can get confused about who knows what in a group of friends and unintentionally say something confidential to somebody who didn't already know. Deliberate betrayals, though, are really acts of aggression or retaliation that require acknowledgement and processing. Accidental betrayals, slip of the tongue, that's more forgivable, but they still matter, especially if they happen to cause someone who was disinhibited by alcohol or drugs or just wasn't paying attention to social cues. Even something seemingly harmless like spilling the beans about a surprise birthday party or mentioning a new job that someone has before they've even given notice to their employer can sour relationships. Historically, I'm kind of an amateur history buff. During World War II, people in the U.S. were advised in these Department of it wasn't Defense Department then, it was called the War Department, but the War Department issued posters to be put up places and with some graphic, and loose lips sink ships. Loose lips sink ships. And the idea was to avoid people casually sharing strategic military details that could endanger lives. If a mother said, "Oh, my son just wrote me, and he's on an aircraft carrier in the South Pacific, and he's heading up to Okinawa. Isn't that nice? He's going to see Japan and fight there." Well, what if that information got out and the ship was somehow intercepted by the enemy? That would literally endanger lives of an entire ship of soldiers. So while that's obviously the extreme, the takeaway here still applies. Be careful with the information that you have. Even mentioning a party that someone wasn't invited to can create hurt feelings. So social discretion matters. So what's the coping strategy for this? When a secret is disclosed, try to understand the intent behind it. Was it malicious or was it just careless? Like an ADD moment of, whoops, I shouldn't have said that. If someone hurt you unintentionally, that's different than if they did it to you on purpose. So you might need to reinforce boundaries or reconsider how much trust that person has earned in your life. And be direct. Tell them when something that you're sharing isn't to be repeated and why, especially the why, because that helps them to keep their mouth shut. If it has, not just, don't tell anybody, but it's, don't tell anybody because of, we want the birthday party to be a surprise. So in my work, I make a point to make anonymous client stories, and I deliberately change identifying details when I give an example of something a client's gone through, because not only am I legally and ethically required to do that to maintain confidentiality, but because trust is sacred. So, I don't want to talk about something a client went through, like, they survived being at ground zero on 9/11, and have somebody say, "Oh, wait, I know him. That's Jim. That's my former roommate." So case examples that I write about or talk about are an amalgam of different clients in different situations, and I deliberately throw things off so that people don't recognize maybe people that they know. Gay circles can be small. So let's talk about fear-based desperation. Sometimes a betrayal doesn't come from cruelty or from carelessness. It comes from panic. A friend sells you out to protect themselves because they're scared of something. A partner lies to avoid conflict with you or just lies to avoid embarrassment. A sibling throws you under the bus to get parental favor. These betrayals still wound even if they weren't intended to. I've worked with clients whose betrayals were rooted in fear. We have historical examples of that. Neighbors turning in each other during the Holocaust in order to save their own skin. Or someone cooperating with a bully boss out of job insecurity. It's mob mentality. Hey, let's all gang up on Sheila. Or fear-based betrayal often stems from power dynamics. Someone chooses self-preservation over loyalty to others. We're seeing that now politically. Look at the people who are selling out and betraying their constituents or betraying people that they know, all because they want to be aligned with what they perceive as the winning team, the power dynamics. They want to be on the right side of the power dynamic. So they'll betray others no matter what it costs because of that greed or because of that thirst for power. But it could also just be a fear. They're just trying to save their own skin or their own office or career or finances. So what is the coping strategy for a fear-based desperation? Understanding the motivation doesn't erase the harm of a betrayal. It may soften your anger, but the boundary violations still matter. Think of it in criminal justice, manslaughter versus murder. The context might be different, but the outcome is still painful. The person's still dead. And sometimes you can work through it. Other times you have to accept that fear made someone unreliable, and that negates their eligibility to be in a relationship with you. Everybody that you know, everybody that you hang out with has to have eligibility to be in your life. You must be this tall to ride this ride at the amusement park. Well, you have to have this level of integrity to be in your life. Otherwise, it's, I don't know her, as Mariah Carey would say. And you just move forward in your life without them. Let's talk about competition among friends and professional allies. Few betrayals sting like the one where someone you helped turns around and then uses that to compete against you, or worse, to sabotage you. This can happen with friends or exes or former colleagues or even mentees. In the gay community, where many careers overlap with creative and entrepreneurial work, betrayal often shows up around clients or reputation or visibility. In some cases, it's just passive aggression. Someone subtly undermines you or spreads doubt or takes credit for your work. In others, it's more overt, copying your business model, poaching your clients or customers, or publicly dissing you and tearing you down. So what's the coping strategy? Legal tools like non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, or cease and desist letters from a lawyer might be needed in some professional cases. But psychologically, it's about letting go of the fantasy that this person was on your side. They seem like they were, but you know what? They weren't. So you grieve the loss, and you don't let it shake you to your core. Eventually, people who betray others tend to show their true colors. They tend to be bad at hiding it in the long term. So those who thrive for the long term do so through integrity, not undercutting others. So choose your allies wisely and don't gamble your vulnerability with people who haven't earned it. As Dolly Parton said, her mother told her, "Dolly, you give a lot to a lot of people, but always hold a little bit back for yourself to take care of yourself." So you always have to hold back just a little bit for yourself. Let's talk about family betrayal and emotional damage. So for many gay men, betrayal starts young. It can be subtle, like a constant invalidation of them as gay boys. They're different from other boys. They're not as good as other boys. Or it can be very overt, like being outed without your consent, or physically harmed, or gay bashed, or bullied, or emotionally abused by parents or siblings, or coaches, or teachers, or community members. Family betrayals are especially painful because they cut deep into your identity and self-worth in the core of the home, the family unit. And these experiences often lay the foundation for later struggles with trust and attachment. We hear a lot about attachment theory, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and self-esteem. Family betrayals can be the antecedent to problems with trust and attachment and self-esteem long after you're grown up and living out on your own. So I've written and spoken before about family-based trauma, including situations where perpetrators are inside the family or where family members enabled the abuse. And healing for this kind of betrayal, that involves a long process of reclaiming one's identity and one's fundamental rights to integrity, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It can mean reworking your beliefs about love and safety, and maybe most importantly, recognizing that what was done to you was not your fault. So what's the coping strategy for that? Trauma-informed therapy and inner child work can help you reconnect with your sense of worth and your sense of safety, reconciling the child that you were who went through difficulty with the self-empowered adult that you are now, sometimes many years later. And then it's about building a chosen family, a group of people who truly support you. It isn't just comforting, it's essential. It gives you a new emotional blueprint to replace the damage done. So let's talk about some final thoughts about healing from betrayal. For gay men, betrayal is often experienced through a uniquely queer lens. Many of us carry layered pain, internalized shame, fear of rejection, cultural pressure to be, perfect, and anxiety about scarcity in our personal or professional communities. There isn't enough to go around. And even if there were, I'm not good enough to have it. All this stuff about lack. And these wounds can amplify the impact of betrayal, making it feel not just like a rupture interpersonally, but a confirmation of our worst fears about trust and belonging. But betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the turning point where you finally learn to set boundaries, where you stop over-explaining, where you start recognizing who deserves your trust and who doesn't. You're populating your life with a cast of characters, or as if you were the author writing a book, or as if you were a playwright making a play and creating a cast of characters. Your life is like that. And where you can reclaim your voice and your power with a new sense of clarity, clear-eyed. So if betrayal has played a role in your recent relationships, romantic, platonic friends, and your family and your professional life, working through it with a professional can help you make sense of what happened and make sense of what it means for your future. Where do we go from here? In therapy, we can identify emotional patterns and process any unresolved trauma. And in coaching, similar but different, we can strengthen your ability to set and hold boundaries, recognize red flags in interpersonal relationships, and create and nurture new relationships that are safe and mutually rewarding and fulfilling. So you don't need to go through all this alone. There is a way to heal, and there's a future where you feel not just safe, but empowered. So if this interests you, call or text 310-339-5778. That's 310-339-5778. Or email ken@gaytherapyla.com. That's the therapy website. Or ken@gaycoachingla.com. And if you're confused by that, I can talk to you about what the differences in those services are. Therapy has to be only with people in California where I'm licensed. Coaching can be anywhere, and it depends on what you as an individual need. For either, you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with me, or if you're ready, you can just book your first full-length session. So 310-339-5778, and texting is always the fastest and the easiest way to reach me. But you can email too if you want to send me some of your background or explain your situation more. So people asked, with the podcast, who are you again? And my bio, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a type of psychotherapist in California. I'm an ASECT, American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, certified sex therapist, which is almost like having another master's degree. It's an 18-month program. And the founder, of course, of Gay Therapy LA and GayCoachingLA.com, with over 33 years of experience helping gay men thrive in your personal and your romantic and your sexual and your professional lives. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.